us in Novato, California on the 7th of July, 2020, talking to Jill and Nils Bergman in Uppsala, right? Sweden.
That's right.
I've never tried to pronounce it before. I drive a Volvo ever since whatever. That's my main connection with Sweden. But I met you in Cape Town about 12 years ago, I think, and didn't realize that you were now back in your homeland. But your work preceded my meeting you. I just lucked out one night when I was there for another conference and realized you were there, called you up. You invited me over, had a delightful evening. Still remember that well. And I wanted to include you in our list of pioneers of infant wellness. And let's start out with your background in terms of what shaped your interest. And Nils, you were telling me you're a fourth generation missionary family. Let's pick up with that and how, in many ways, I feel like I'm a missionary too. It's like getting this word out. So you were, start with where you're born, family, siblings, birth order, what your early experiences were.
I was born right here in Uppsala, not far from where we're living. And my father had come back to Sweden after himself being a missionary. He started as a missionary after I was born, but his father had been a missionary, and my great-grandfather, first in Eritrea, and then my grandfather was in Zululand and in Zimbabwe, what was Rhodesia. So my father grew up there and then studied in Cape Town. And then he came here. So I was born here. I was 1 year old. My first birthday was in Zimbabwe, what was then Southern Rhodesia still. And I have three sisters that were born there. I have a fourth one that was born 10 years later. So I count them as 3 plus 1.
You were the only boy.
I'm the only boy, yeah. So I grew up in Zimbabwe. I went to school in Zimbabwe. I did a little bit of schooling in Sweden, but then I did my medical degree at the University of Cape Town. And that in the English system is a 6-year course, and then a 1-year internship. Things have changed since then, but so I become a generalist doctor at the end of that time. It's different to the United States system, more like the British system.
The same one we have in Australia, so I'm familiar with it. Now, is the medical school up on the hill on the side of the mountain like the rest of the university, or is it down in the flats more?
It's just over the shoulder. So it's up on the hill, but on its own hill, more towards the city.
That's the most unusual university. When I was taken up there, it's like you get a lot of exercise going up and down that hill.
It's the fairest cape in all the world, and the university isn't so shabby.
Yeah, delightful time there. So what led you to medicine? Go back in your childhood, more earlier schooling experiences and so forth that led on to medicine.
I'm not sure really. I went to boarding school. My father was a mission doctor in a very remote area. He himself had been to boarding school. I went to the same boarding school in the city of Bulawayo. And even before that, in junior school, I was a boarder. So I don't have any particular happy memories or many memories of school. It was what we had to do. But growing up on the mission station was a private backyard paradise. I had 20 miles south of me and 50 miles east and west. That was my backyard.
Wow.
And I had a wonderful time enjoying nature. I had a gun and a dog in those days. That was okay. So I was happy. But then the boarding school was a structured life, and I got decent grades to get into medical school.
Uh-huh. So what age were you when you went to boarding school?
5.
Oh, so right from the start. Hmm.
So now you're looking at my wife here. She's smiling at me. Since I'm married, I've been in rehab for that, and it's working well. I'm doing all right.
Well, let's switch over, Jill, and find out what your history is. And I assume you've been together quite a while. We'll get to how you met and when and so forth. But
I grew up in Cape Town. I'm from South Africa, and I lived there till I was 7. And then we moved to Johannesburg for 8 years, and then went back to Cape Town. And I finished my schooling there the last 2 years, and then I went to University of Cape Town. And there I met Nils.
so you met at school. And what family constellation, what did your folks do, and siblings? And
my father was a town planner and had studied in America, in Philadelphia. So I'd spent a year there when I was 5. He was a town planner, designing roads, trying to make equal housing for everybody. Right back in 1967, he was fighting for it already, to try and have equal housing and good transport systems throughout the city that were cheap and available for everybody. So that was something that he worked a lot on.
Was that in Johannesburg, or where did he?
Cape Town and Johannesburg.
Oh.
He was the president of town planning of South Africa for a long time. And yeah, so that was his background. My mother was at home with us most of the time, worked with Dad for a while. I'm the youngest of 4. And yeah, we spent a lot of time in the bush. We loved the bush and holidays away.
Brothers and sisters, the other 3, or?
2 brothers and then a sister who's 4 years older than me.
Mm-hmm. So then what were your interests when you went off to the university?
I was very interested in geography, and I did geography and English as majors for my degree, and then a teacher's diploma. So I'm a high school teacher.
Mm-hmm. And now I assume that you met somewhere in your education. Let's hear the story from both of you of how the first meeting was. What was the connection?
It's a nice story, I can tell you. So our medical degree is 6 years, and then at the end of the 6th year, you write off the exam for the last 3 years. So you have a week of written exams, and then a week of various vivas and practicals, and then a week of oral exams. So it's 3 intense weeks to pass after 3 years of training. And you get 1 week study leave. Mm-hmm. That week of study leave didn't seem like a good idea to me. What was I going to stress about? So rather than study, I said, if I don't know it by now, I'm not. So I joined a hiking group with the YMCA. And I went on a 3-day hike in the mountains. Much better preparation for 3 rigorous weeks of exams than sitting swatting, I thought. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, it's summer, everything should be nice, and the weather should be good. But a storm hit the group as we started. and it was hailing. There was ice around, and this is a long story. Are you still okay? So now I'm, and then there's some heroes in the group. They're going to go off to the hut and light the fire so everything's ready when everybody comes in. And that's the worst thing you can do in a group, to split it up on bad weather. People die on that trail, even now, 20, 40 years later. So they ran off, and the whole group got split up. And there were two girls who, one had a bad knee, one had a bad hip. So I took extra rucksack, and it started raining. We got wet, and everybody walked off and did their own things. Now, I was helping these two girls at the back, and then there was another girl that you see here. And so we helped, and we sang songs, and we jumped in puddles, and we eventually arrived at the hut, having walked everybody safely. The group at the end had grown a bit because everybody was struggling. So we got them all safely to the hut, and we came inside to find that there was no fire. The rain had put out everybody's matches. But I was prepared. I have hiked before. So I had a little matchbox broken up inside a film container, old style film container.
Yeah.
And I had matches. Meanwhile, the girl next door to me had exactly the same matchbox set up. So the two of us who walked in last had dry matches, and we could have a fire. So this girl, I kind of quoted the Rider Haggard. No, it's not Rider Haggard, it's Kipling. Infinite resource and sagacity.
Ah, so
at that time,
this is a match made in heaven, huh?
At that stage, I still had to get rid of a girlfriend that I had elsewhere. But we kept communication, and then we fell in love 4 years later when I had started trying to deal with my issues.
Wow. Okay. Now let's hear it from your side, Jill. How did you experience this?
Well, I hadn't ever met Nils before, and I've grown up hiking in the mountains since I was 4. So I was always, it was drummed into us, you never split a party, you always go at the speed of the slowest, because the mountains, especially in South Africa, can be very dangerous in terms of weather, particularly, and it's just very rough and very isolated. So I was going at the back. I'd noticed this person because he was smiling and joining in with the fun. And I was impressed when he had dry matches. And I thought, very nice. But he was a doctor, so there wasn't a chance. But we connected during his housemanship year. He used to come to relax at our house at Betty's Bay, which is an hour's drive, our holiday house, an hour's drive from Cape Town. And he used to come and stay over the weekend with my parents and come to the farm for the weekend. And we got to know each other well. And then 2 years later, he'd invited me to Sweden. So I went to Sweden and went to visit him. And I stayed.
The story should add now that as much as Jill's family have a beach cottage, we also have a beach cottage, a seaside cottage here in Sweden. So we had to reciprocate the visits. And it was on this romantic island that we fell in love.
Ah, sweet. So now you completed your medical training and you went back to Sweden for a period, or what career-wise was the next step?
So I did the internship year in Cape Town. And then I did have in mind that I was going to be a mission doctor. And for that, there is now a specialty, a formal specialty called rural medicine, a 4-year training. It didn't exist in those days, but I spent 6 years learning basic orthopedics, basic obstetrics, basic neonatology, basic everything, so that I was an all-round doctor that I could cope as a single doctor in a remote environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that halfway through the time that I met Jill. I was also getting my Swedish medical registration, so that I've done the degree exams and the legislative requirements for practicing in Sweden.
Mm-hmm. So, but you were doing most of this in South Africa still, the training.
I did 2 years in Sweden, so I could learn medicine and psychiatry.
Oh.
But 4 years, I did obstetrics and surgery and orthopedics and anesthesia in the Ciskei. After we married, we returned to the Ciskei, and I spent 2 years so that I would feel confident and competent to deal with primary level care, trauma, and anything actually.
What's this guy?
The Ciskei and the Transkei were two apartheid homeland states.
Oh, okay. It's an area then, a geographic.
It's an
On
area.
the East Coast.
Uh-huh. Now, Jill, were you teaching at this point, or what was your career development?
Yes, I was teaching. I taught in East London. I was teaching geography and English. And
In London?
then, sorry?
Did you say in London?
No, East London.
Another
East
city,
London.
1,000 miles, 1,000 kilometers from Cape Town.
Oh, okay. I never heard of that. Glad I clarified. It's a little closer than London, London.
Yes. No, it's on the eastern coast of South Africa.
Okay.
Southeast coast. So I was teaching there, and then we traveled up to Zimbabwe. We took a year off traveling, and we went up to Zimbabwe, and it was while we were there that we heard that we had been accepted for the mission course, to go and be missionaries with this Church of Sweden mission, which Nils has 4 generations behind him that has worked for that mission organization. So we decided to do that. We then came to Sweden. I learned a whole lot more Swedish, and we did the mission course before going out to Zimbabwe.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Southern Rhodesia.
sounds like you got married somewhere in there. Let's go back to when and where.
So 1984 was the year Jill came to Sweden to visit, and we married 6 months later, but now back in South Africa.
Uh-huh.
I was almost 30, so it was danger time. Huh?
And we got married on my parents' farm.
Uh-huh. So you said you were almost 50.
30.
30, okay. I was going to say 50. That's you don't look like that much of an age gap. So now you've gone off to the mission. What was that like?
I think we had a wonderful time. So we were sent by the church to the very hospital that my father had built and where I grew up.
Wow.
So as we arrived, the local people give Jill the name of Malukazana, which is daughter-in-law. So we were totally accepted socially, family-wise, by the people that we were working with. It's an amazing privilege. We made deep connections, deep friends. I knew many people from my childhood. I've been away 15 years. The war had intervened in between there, so some time had gone past. Nevertheless, it was coming home. And so we worked 6 wonderful years on that mission hospital. All our children were born there.
Mm-hmm. Now, where is it in relation to, my geography is pretty sketchy in relation to?
It's on near the border between Botswana and South Africa, but just in Zimbabwe. So it's the southwestern corner of Zimbabwe.
Southwest, okay. And What a
It's
connection.
it's 200 kilometers due south of the nearest city in Bulawayo. So it's a remote and far and beautiful nature, a lot of natural history, a lot of old cultural history, Iron Age. So it was a spectacular space to be. And if I could have chosen, I'd be there still.
Mm. Why couldn't you choose? What was the intervening factor?
Politics, different kinds of politics. Zimbabwe politics got xenophobic and anti-white. The church had its own politics. These things happen. So after 7 years, we then were denied a residence permit in Zimbabwe.
Oh. Now, have you maintained connection with any of your people there, or do you know what's, yeah, that was quite a while ago.
Yes, for many years, my sister still lived there. She's recently moved. I have cousins there. Jill has a whole family of cousins there. I spoke 2 weeks ago with somebody that I grew up with when I was a child. He's a bit older than me. So no, yes, but you can't visit very easily, and the situations are very bad. My daughter, in fact, has married a man from Zimbabwe, and his family are still in the capital city.
Mm-hmm.
So Zimbabwe is still close to our hearts, but it's not a very functional place.
Mm. So, what was your experience? And dating this, we're talking late 80s, or what were the dates that you were those 6 years?
So that 1988 to 95.
Oh, okay. So how was your experience with the whole revolution in South Africa, and what I got a bit of a introduction when I was visiting, but the enormity of the transition just still baffles me. And of course, Trevor Noah is one of our favorite comedians, and we get his story regularly, and his mother and so forth. But Yvonne read his biography. But what was it like for you guys?
So I think that I was studying and keeping my head focused on getting my basic training in the apartheid time, and I was working with in those rural areas, and then at the previously 1980, as I was finishing my degree, the Zimbabwean independence took place. And between 1982 and 83, 81, 82, 83, 84, there was what we call the 5th Brigade. Was the Red Berets, when they came and mass raped and looted and murdered thousands of people, if you like, a kind of tribal revenge of one tribe against another, going back hundreds of years of animosity. So that had recently ended when we arrived in Zimbabwe in 1988.
Mm.
So it was still very, very fresh in memory. When we visited the first times, there was still, the car had a big cross on it, red cross on it, so that nobody on either side would shoot at it.
And amnesty occurred while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted the kind of guerrillas who were hiding to come out. But it was a very, very bad time. In the meantime, when we were now in Zimbabwe, those 7 years was a good time for Zimbabwe. Things were getting better. Nevertheless, after that Mukuranda time. So the time when we then got denied a residence permit was exactly 1 year after South Africa apartheid ended. So it felt good that we could go back and be part of building that up, as we've been part of building up in Zimbabwe. So this rebuilding, restoring, reworking, kind of part of my framework, perhaps as a missionary. Of my dad built a hospital. My grandfather built several mission stations and farms. So it felt good, 95, that we could come back to South Africa.
Mm-hmm. And so you were there until recently, or how? Any other?
Part of the reason was Jill had family there, but I could also study a master's in public health while working. So I did such a degree, Master Public Health, at the University of the Western Cape under Professor David Saunders, who's sadly has passed away, but he should be one of your health icons probably also.
Mm-hmm.
Primary health care, David Saunders.
Okay.
So then that was in 95. And then we stayed on in Cape Town. Both of us had been moved during our schooling and felt that that wasn't good for us. So we wanted our children to benefit from the stability of one home and one place for their schooling years. So in fact, then they left. And it took us a while to also say we've got no particular reason here. I stopped working for the government after 10 years in 2005. And then up to, well, these last 15 years, well, for 10 years, 12 years, we were living in South Africa, but I never worked there at all. I traveled globally in my work. So it didn't make much sense just living in South Africa. Yes, it did. It's lovely. We were very happy there. But then our children left home, and we have so I think partly the triggering factor to move to Sweden was my father. He's now 92. And 3 weeks ago, he fractured his femoral neck, so he's weak. But we're nursing him back to health. In summertime in Sweden, you should do that yourself. Don't rely on any other help. And Jill is particularly good at caring. So, but we've been here 2 years, nearly 2 years, and really supporting my sister, who's having my dad in her home.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go back to your children. How many did you have, and how did that influence your eventual work with infants? I'm assuming there must be some connection there. And Jill, let's switch over to you for some. You're the mom.
We had all of our children in Zimbabwe, as Nils has said, and Rebecca was born about a year after we came to Zimbabwe, and they grew up there, and it was a wonderful place to have children growing up. Very special place. And they could be out in the bush, they could be walking around in summer clothes all year round. So it was a very, very special place. And I lost little Rebecca, is our oldest, and I couldn't find her one day, and I thought, oh, it was amnesty time, so I was a little bit concerned. But I went to the hospital, and everybody knew her because they called her our child, as in their own, because they knew the father. So this is our child who belongs to us. And then I went to feeling a little bit worried about her because there were cars would be driving through the mission station as well. But then I found her down at our local priest's house, Reverend Mata, and she was sitting there eating sweet potatoes with them. So I really felt very safe there. It was a wonderful place. The children belonged. Everybody knew us. It was a very good place. I was teaching at the high school for the first year, but when the children were born, then I was at home for those years, and I helped with preschools and teaching the preschool teachers, and worked with the Girl Guides very much on empowering the woman to be able to do things. So they learned first aid, which they used a lot at the sports events, etc. So the children grew up there in a safe environment, out in the bush, surrounded by friendly people, very, very special. So when we came to Cape Town, Rebecca said, "Mummy, what language do they speak in that house?" And she pointed at a house down the road, and I said, "I don't know." But she grew up with different languages, different cultures. So everybody spoke a different language, whether it be Sotho or Sindebele or Swedish or English or Shona or whatever. So they grew up multicultural, and that stood them in good stead when they went to school. Rebecca has grown up, and she became a doctor as well. But she's now living in the States, in San Francisco, with her husband and little girl. And Simon is now in Sweden, and his wife is a doctor, and they are living about half an hour's train ride from here, as is Emma and her husband. So we were there in Cape Town for a long time.
But I'll take you back a little bit on the story here. So in Zimbabwe, there were no other small children when the kids were born. Later there was one. So there wasn't any magazines, there wasn't any classes, there wasn't any role models. There was nobody to tell Jill how she should be a mother. So she could do her mothering very much instinctively, very much how she felt. Yes, she could see how the local culture was doing it, and they did some very good things, and they did some things that didn't feel good for her. And so this was an important thing. You asked what influence it has. In this particular way, Jill then could evoke inside herself maternal instincts. Now, that doesn't sound bad to you, but if I tell that to my obstetrician colleagues, they roll their eyes. But here there was a deep expression of them that was evoked very naturally, without stress. So now, many years later, when I come to apply some neuroscience and some developmental science and some life history theory and some various things to kind of meld together an understanding of infant wellness, I kind of make a discovery and I come and share it with her, and she says, "Duh, everybody knows that." And I said, "Sorry, lady, only you know that." So this was an important part of the privilege of growing up in this environment, of just being able to connect to children, having an emotional connection, having tuned into the child and its needs, and security and trust, empathy. Those kinds of words were part of being a mother, of being a child.
And it was very wonderful because I didn't have to compare myself to a lot of other children, like a lot of people at school age children. There's a lot of comparison and a lot of competition between parents, that my child is better than your child, and the children didn't have any of that at all, which was wonderful.
Now, what was the birth, were the births like? Hospital, home, midwives, obstetricians, what?
When we went to, Nils as a doctor really did not want to be the doctor for his own wife, which I think is a wise decision. But we went to Minene Mission Station, where there were 2 Swedish doctors, and the first birth was actually she was breech, and they just said, a big baby, breech, no chance of a normal delivery, primate. So I had a cesarean.
But it was the closest thing to a home cesarean that you could imagine. Jill went into the normal theater of the mission hospital there. But from the operating room, we put her in the back of the car and straight back to her bed. And we brought with us our own midwife that we were working with back in the Manama mission to Manene. So Jill had home care from the first hour afterwards with the baby in bed.
Postpartum doula.
Was a wonderful midwife. She still is a midwife working in Sweden, and a very special friend as well. But in the operation, they put the baby straight onto my chest, which was unusual even in those days. I had requested that, and she just was never separated from me.
At that stage, we had started doing skin-to-skin contact and kangaroo mother care, it was called. But it was a kind of assumption, really, that we were still doing this only on premature babies, on small babies. So Jill had been directly involved in that early premature work. And she spontaneously kind of felt that baby doesn't have to be premature, it can still stay with me. That's a natural mothering thing. And Agneta, as the midwife, had also worked at neonatal units in Sweden, so she wasn't anxious about a small baby, a newborn baby, and was very happy that then the care of the mother and the baby was never separated.
I think that was very wonderful, because it's really difficult in hospitals where the babies are taken to a nursery that's separate from the mother, and it increases the mother's stress level, but it also very much increases the baby's stress level when they're newborn. If they're on the mother, the heart rate calms, everything is much more relaxed for both the mother and the baby.
When I was born, there was a flood in this little town. It was a 19-bed hospital, and it was 2 weeks in the nursery before I got out. So it was pretty traumatic, and there were so many other babies. It was probably pretty loud with all the screaming. There was a newspaper article about how many babies were born that week. This was January 43, the very beginning of the baby boom. And but now you've introduced your primary interest. Let's go back and develop how you got interested in kangaroo care, and from the very beginning, what led to that?
So briefly, in 1987, when we joined the Church of Sweden mission, there was a 6-month period and some induction and training. But the church also arranged for me to do a diploma course, a full-on diploma in child health. And on it, I met a midwife who subsequently got stationed at the same place as we were. So we met doing a diploma course in child health, and then got sent to the same mission hospital. During her course, she and some midwife colleagues had done a little mini thesis on the kangaroo mother method that was described in Colombia, in Bogota. So there were only 5 published papers known at that stage. This was in 1987. With that, 1988, January, we came to the mission hospital, and I'd looked at their paper and I knew no otherwise. And when they were writing it, as they looked at all our papers, we all shared them in the group. So we decided that we would do this kangaroo mother thing. And she was an experienced midwife and an experienced neonatal nurse. So she could combine these 2 pieces at a very practical level. I had done neonatal intensive care in the CISCI and knew how to do the practical stuff at a primary level. We didn't have incubators. We didn't have ventilators, nor even, which is now what we prefer, continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP. But what we could do is immediately the baby was born, and this was the key, put the baby in skin to skin, and then do the care that we were used to giving. We had some oxygen in a cylinder, and we would try and dilute it and not give it in a toxic dose. We would do various things that are basically done. Our predecessors at the hospital were very good doctors, and they were exercising what's called the ZDAP, the Zimbabwe Essential Drugs Action Program, which is standardized care. We followed exactly that standardized care, only we did it with baby on mother from birth, and the baby was on mother continuously.
Mm-hmm.
We started this in January. It was a small baby born, 1,000 grams. And the nurses would have put that baby in the scrub, in the sluice room. Such babies had no chance of survival. But we said, no. Now, not all babies at 1,000 grams that we looked after did survive. This one, however, did, the very, very first one. And it changed the mindsets of the nurses. They believed that this could work.
Mm.
The baby didn't get only skin to skin. It got all the different things that we could give it, some antibiotics, and we gave it aminophylline sometimes, and we gave it some indomethacin if we felt like. So we really worked on these babies, and we didn't just ignore them and think kangaroo mother care was but it was the basic. It was the place that provided upstream, downstream support for the care we gave. And it was very, very, very noticeable from the very, very beginning. So that first case, kind of like a single case,
this was
turned the mind.
Your 6 years at the mission. This is where this happened, right?
So this was in January 1988 that we started. It took us 2-3 months. There weren't many babies being born. So Jill and Agneta sewed a shirt that enabled the mother to sleep with the baby safely. So the baby couldn't get off mother's chest because there was no other way of keeping it warm. And so we secured the airway with a cloth and a shirt around that, which Agneta and Jill developed. And then we worked out some basic routines about feeding. We started giving breast milk from the very, very beginning. There was nothing else. And so we developed early breastfeeding, continuous skin to skin, and a lot of work supporting the mother and doing something totally off the wall that she'd never heard of for the community, what you call psychological support. But after 3 months of setting it in place, we would just boast about these small babies to visitors. It wasn't any work. After 6 years, after 5 years, I think it was, then we collected all the cases. I had scored their gestational ages carefully. I had done all the proper care that I was taught and trained. And so we could publish a paper on the improved mortality. What had been a mortality of 50% became a mortality of 10% in what we call very low birth weight babies between 1,000 and 1,500 grams. A dramatic improvement in survival. And we published that as a historical case control. And nobody wants to publish such things, but Tropical Doctor took it. Tropical Doctor is published in the UK for practical support of mission doctors. So they took it.
And now these were all at your mission hospital. And how many in the sample size?
126 babies.
Wow.
And we could look at babies below 1,500 and above 1,500 up to 2,000. So the survival was equal through, we plotted them according to gestational age and according to gestational weight, gestational age and weight. And you see the same lowering on both levels, on both dimensions.
For our American viewers that may not be as familiar with the metric system, 1,000 grams or a kilo is about 2.5 pounds. up to, you said, what, 2,500? I'm trying to remember.
Below 1,500 is the definition of a very low birth weight. Between 1,500 and 2,500 grams is what we call low birth weight.
Right.
I think 2.5 kilos, it would be 6 pounds, I guess.
Yeah.
Gestational?
Gestational age is delinked from that, yeah.
So now going back to Bogota and the original, I remember reading that ages ago. Who actually cooked up the term kangaroo? That sounds like it would have come out of Australia, but it didn't. Is there any historical credit given to the terminology?
Yes, Dr. Ray was the senior neonatologist, and working with him was Hector Martinez and a Dr. Navarrete. There were three of them who were working in this small hospital, and they were all trained on California. And they came back to Bogota to practice neonatal care, and they had 8 incubators and between 20 and 30 small babies to fit into these incubators. Now they came upon this idea that they could put the babies in skin to skin and used the word in their local environment of the kangaroo mother method.
Mm-hmm.
So the original phrase was not kangaroo mother care or kangaroo care, but kangaroo mother method. That was original. And what started was that these babies were put home in skin to skin after 2 weeks so that they didn't die of cross infections. It was cross infections that were killing them when they were 3 to an incubator. By sending them home, they didn't get those infections and they survived.
Uh-huh.
They still actually had an 11% mortality when they were discharged, which wouldn't be an acceptable mortality in these days, but in those days, it was 70% otherwise.
Yeah, big improvement.
So it was huge. So the key thing, though, which was the point of departure, which we took somewhat unconsciously, that the baby first had to be stable in an incubator. This was the key departure point. We didn't have the incubator, so we skipped it. And we discovered that we were doing much, much better. The incubator was actually making the babies worse.
Yeah.
Now that statement I've made and I've published for 30 years, 32 now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And only recently now am I getting the evidence base and the scientific rationale that I can leave behind. But very much so, the separation alone causes problems. The incubator adds to those problems.
Yeah, yeah. That's,
But I think it is plain biology that if a baby is separated from its mother, it doesn't stand much chance of survival. The mother is the safe place for that baby.
the mother-baby unit. They're not separate.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're one unit,
And
they should stay like that. And I think for a mother to have her baby taken away must be really difficult, stressful for the mother, but also stressful for the baby.
Yeah.
That's what happens in every intensive care unit.
Now, this talking is comfortable to you in your ears, Jack, but it hasn't been well received with my colleagues originally. It's taken a very long journey to be able to say that and not be shouted down.
Yeah, yeah. It's frightening how the allopathic medical model has brainwashed generations and continues to. And it's been one of my callings from when I left medicine to go into wellness. And finally, we had to spell the word wellness on the phone in the first 5 years when I had the center. Now it's everyone knows the word, even though the concept has been watered down. So now you were in contact with the Colombians from early on, and you said you were sharing.
No, My first meeting with the Colombians was in 1996.
Oh, okay.
No longer was Dr. Ray alive at that point. Dr. Martinez was still alive, is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
But a Natalie Sharpak, who's originally from France and married to a Colombian man, had set up a kangaroo Fundación Kangaroo in Bogota.
Mm-hmm.
And she very strongly has promoted the Ray model of kangaroo mother care, the original model where it was late to start. They first had to have incubator care, and then they were put to breastfeeding, and then they were sent home. And this original model she has espoused very, very strongly as kind of almost confrontational opposition to the idea that I've said that zero separation.
Mm-hmm.
From the start.
And they still haven't figured that out.
The figuring out is just about to come. So this is jumping a little story here now, but 5 years ago, yep, I think about 5 years ago, we were able to persuade a program officer at the Gates Foundation. And she in turn were able to persuade the WHO. The Gates Foundation funded a randomized controlled trial, which has been completed in January this year, just in time before COVID comes in and kicks in. There's a blessing in that too, I'm sure. And so the target was to randomize 4,000 babies, 4,000 babies.
Mm-hmm.
And from 1,000 grams to 1,800 grams. And they were getting immediate skin to skin, half of them, and normal incubator care, the other half of them. The immediate was based on their weight. So it wasn't quite immediate because obviously you have to weigh them before you can start skin to skin. So purely pragmatically, they were getting skin to skin approximately after 1 hour. So the immediate is really, sorry?
It took an hour to weigh them? That's pretty extreme.
It takes an hour in a tertiary hospital in Africa and India to be there, to weigh, to go through all the randomized control trial protocols to ensure that the randomization is done. So this is very, very rigorous randomized control trial that makes this time factor. But the story then is that the Data Safety Monitoring Board stopped the study after 3,000 babies due to benefit.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit in terms of survival, not just health, but survival is profound.
Mm.
Now, it takes a while to clean up a database because it's very rigorous. And then it takes a while to analyze it. And now it's taking extra long for the manuscript to come out. We hope the manuscript will be, I was hoping I'd have it in my hands, but I wouldn't share it with you, Jack, I'm sorry. but we hope to have the manuscript in the next days and to find somebody that would publish it as a priority.
And where were the studies done? What you said, India and Africa?
Delhi in India, and Tanzania, Malawi, Ghana, Nigeria.
And what's your connection with the study? Did you set it up, or are you a principal?
So the protocol is originally what I wrote with my colleagues, based directly on the study I did in South Africa, which is based directly on the work I did in Zimbabwe. The difference now is that in the process, Jill has been working a lot with me on this level. So when we come to work in India in particular, and Africa generally, a man coming to put a baby skin to skin on a woman and helping with the breastfeeding, not clever. Mm-hmm. So Jill has actually been the primary agent of implementation of the intervention of immediate kangaroo mother care. Immediate skin contact. So we've been working together for 3 years on the study. going to the sites 2 or 3 times a year, ensuring that the protocol is followed, ensuring that the care is given. The care is not just skin to skin. We also support the minimum package of care for newborn babies as defined by the WHO. And with that, we also, as part of Jill's particular function, bring in developmental care, developmentally supportive care, also called infant and family-centered developmental care. So here was a systems change. Mothers had to be in the NICU. So we have defined a new phenomenon called a mother NICU. The mother is in resident in the NICU. She gets her obstetric care in the mother NICU. And this kind of systems change comes from Jill's direct work that we've been doing together for 30 years. But now we're very formally recognized for doing it together for the last 3 years. And that's been a huge privilege. Very exciting.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah. So now in this protocol, the ones that are doing the kangaroo care, are they in a NICU for that, or what are the specifics of the
so the mother NICU is basically a mother bed in a neonatal intensive care unit. That's it.
So
there are machines, there are drips, there are oxygens, there are the usual monitoring mechanisms so that we don't give babies retinopathy. All of those basic standards of care are being done on babies who are living on their mothers. But the mothers have to do this 24 hours a day, and some do, but not all can. And so part of our protocol is that surrogates, whether they are granny or sister or somebody else, a whole system of change where family comes into the NICU, literally, family comes into the NICU. And Jill has had to work at getting the mindsets of staff around this. So her work has been with those families, but also directly with the nurses to understand that the families need to be here and how they need to be here. They also have to do hygiene. In these COVID days, they must wash their hands. We were doing it before COVID came. Mm-hmm. But Jill had to show the staff and the mothers together how to function in a NICU to provide developmental care and minimum package of care in skin-to-skin contact.
And now you were having to travel to the different sites?
For the last 2 or 3 years, we've been of no fixed abode.
Uh-huh. Wow. Nomad.
And we've been traveling to Sweden and Geneva and London. And then we also do, so Jill is working as a kangaroo-la. This is a word that, kangaroo doula is a kangaroo-la.
Love it.
There's training in Europe and in America for kangaroo-la care.
Uh-huh. Now, the intervening time from when you did these first studies up to this crowning achievement that's about to get published, what has you've traveled and preached the word? I guess this is another aspect of your missionary calling. Tell me more about how you first started getting some attention. And, you know, I heard about you probably 15 years ago, but how has that been, and particularly accepted by the obstetrical community? What have some of your struggles and triumphs been?
I think the first group very early on that understood what I was doing and saying was the La Leche League. Mm-hmm. That's well known in the United States. And I was invited to talk about this experience at a South African La Leche League conference, at which one of the founders was present. La Leche League, I think, is probably 60 years old now, and in turn conceived out of it, that group came the International IBCLC, the
International Board Lactation Consultants.
Lactation Consultant Association. where they have a very professional training and accreditation, certification. That group of people kind of worked very much in the United States to provide a foot-in for me to give this message. Malaysia League for breastfeeding, ILCA for being able to come to hospitals, give workshops, give grand rounds, give talks. I think there was a 2-year period when I did 60 grand rounds in the United States.
Wow.
So there was a period when I traveled very intensively and I did nothing else. The 2005, 2010, and so on. And then more and more progressive hospitals would invite me directly to speak on this. Neonatologists, not yet. Obstetricians, not yet. I think the neonatal care here in Sweden already understood what we are doing before us. The original research that we referred to precedes our experience in Zimbabwe. So the research on breastfeeding and early neonatal care was happening here in Sweden already and was percolating through to neonatal units. So for the last 10 years, the transition I've had is to connect with a colleague, a neonatologist here in Sweden called Björn Westrup, based at the Karolinska Institute, who is a full-fledged neonatologist, is also a director of the NIDCAP Federation in Sweden. NIDCAP is the program started by Heidlis Als, Neonatal Individualized Developmental Care Assessment Program. And that comes with an understanding at an intellectual research level exactly what Jill was doing 30 years ago with her own children. Exactly what Jill was seeing with very, very small babies in the hospital when she was sewing their shirts. So the kind of the melding of the same thought pattern, but from totally different backgrounds, totally different systems. It's the same biology at work. It's the same physiology. It's the same created order, if you like.
Now, I meant to ask, with the mothers in the neonatal units, are you using a similar kind of shirt to contain the baby? What physical?
The identical shirt.
Okay.
The identical shirt is used.
Now, are you hand sewing them yourself, or have you got a company making them, or what's the?
We had a small company making them in Cape Town, and then we never got a trademark copyright on them. At the very early stage, we printed the picture of how it works in a WHO guideline, but nobody actually used it or knew how to use it because nobody believed that it was done immediately. So with the study, we provided some shirts to some of the sites, but the other sites very quickly started making them. India and Tanzania make their own as part of hospital garments. That's the model to use, we think.
Is there a picture on your website that I can put a link to it for people that?
Yes, there is.
I'll track that down. Good.
It's on the ninobirth.org website under products.
Okay.
And we still have them for sale, but we're not business people or salespeople. Yeah.
Now, Jill, how was it for you with all the traveling? Did you accompany Nils, or were you staying home, or what?
No, I was staying at home because our children were very busy and
2005, 2015 period.
Yeah.
They were very active and they had sports every afternoon. We do a lot of sport in South Africa. So they had activities after school. So I was full-time single parenting when Nils was away. But I've been involved, I think as a teacher, I've been quite early on, I did translated I said there has to be a manual, there has to be a book. So Nils and I sat together and I would write and he would explain. So we wrote a book called Hold Your Prem, Prem as in premature baby. And that's for sale in America, it's for sale everywhere. But that was...
The American edition is called Hold Your Premi. It's a very different language to English.
But
yeah, I didn't know what prem meant at first. I thought it was a pram, but
Premino.
Yeah.
But my goal was to translate the complicated neuroscience and the technicalities of having a preterm baby and make it so that the parents could understand and be part of the care. So it's very much a book that we've done together. Nils putting in the medical feedback, and I said, would it sound like this, translating it into normal speak for the parents to understand? And that is available. And making DVDs, I've used my teaching. We've made 4 DVDs of the neuroscience of all of the aspects of kangaroo mother care. So I've used those to educate people about KMC.
Perhaps I could add there. So when it came to doing this study, perhaps I should put in this, it will be an important thing to say. We then collaborated our connection with the Gates Foundation via the Karolinska Institute. And now, when we came to take this intervention to India and to Africa, we took it from Karolinska Institute. So the colleagues at Karolinska Institute filmed mothers getting immediate skin to skin and getting this kind of care. And Jill was there. And Jill was actually the editor and the narrator of that training film that we made for the immediate kangaroo mother care study under the WHO. And so this is not a third world solution. This is state-of-the-art care in Karolinska Institute that we have shipped to Africa and India. Not only that, before we took it to Africa and India, we tested whether we could ship it in Europe, and we took it to Stavanger, Norway. And they are paralleling a similar study right now. So Jill has done the training in Stockholm and the training in Norway, and then the same training in India and Africa. And the film that is capturing this is available online also.
Great, I'll get a link for that. So you say they're doing a parallel study in Norway?
Yes, in Sweden. So unfortunately, COVID isn't helping us right now.
Yeah.
And the system doesn't want to pay for this either. So it's very difficult to get funding. But it's called EPISTOS in Sweden, Norway. EPISTOS stands for immediate, parent, infant, skin to skin, EPISTOS.
Oh.
And parent. The difference now is we know the gestational age of these babies before they're born. And therefore, the randomization can take place before the baby is born. Therefore, it's actually immediate. It really is immediate.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And now, this is a first world country. Mortality isn't an issue. So we're looking only for 6 hours at what the difference can be to the physiology, to the transition period, to microbiota, to epigenetics, genetics, telomeres, and then what it can do to breastfeeding and what it might do to parents and what it will do in the long term. We have some preliminary data that shows that it is doing what we hope.
So they're just getting 6 hours from the start, and then you're comparing that to controls to see what.
And the controls are getting skin to skin after 6 hours.
After 6 hours, okay.
So it really is a test of immediate only, because kangaroo mother care, skin-to-skin contact is standard of care for all babies in Sweden. That's what we shipped.
And do they continue after the 6 hours as well?
Yes, originally the intention was that we would give the intervention group extra hours to compare to the control group. That has not happened in reality, but we've been pretty successful in giving the intervention group more than 5 hours of skin-to-skin contact in the first 6, and keeping the control group less than 1 hour.
Fascinating. Now, tell me what it was like to get the funding originally, and how you got the grant, and was that a struggle?
It's 25 years struggle.
Yeah.
But eventually, yeah, there's a story. Björn Westrup, working with Tanzanian colleagues, bent the ear of one of the directors from the Gates Foundation. And so that director sent a message to a program officer who happened to be visiting an HIV program in South Africa. And so she said, well, I'm at the airport and I'm flying at 8 o'clock. I can meet somebody at 7 o'clock. So Jill and I drove 6 hours from the northern part of South Africa where we were on holiday. And I was able to meet Janet Patterson. And he then we had another meeting and then another talk. But that began a process that eventually led to a planning grant. She was able to persuade the Gates Foundation to pay for a proper plan where we visited 7 or 8 countries and settled on 5. And from that, subsequently, that grant led to a proposal which was handed over to the World Health Organization. Program director is Rajiv Bal. And so the WHO has been sponsor and conductor of the study. At this level of mortality study, of the complexity of care, of being able to have the clout to make tertiary hospitals change systems, one needs the World Health Organization. But not only that, the result comes straight from the research office across the corridor to the policy office. So we're very excited, very excited.
I'm delighted that I tracked you down and got to talk to you at this moment of importance in your life work. Just seemingly random, but if you believe in random.
I'm a missionary. I believe in the Lord, that everything is in His hands and His timing.
Yeah, this has been great. Any other comments on this your work for both of you, and where do you see it going? Oh, I wanted to say, I interviewed Phyllis Klaus a few weeks ago, and Marshall had died, but I always remember Marshall saying, if doulas were a drug, everyone would be on them, and yet the acceptance is still very partial in the States. I don't know in Sweden or other places, the similar struggle of here's this wonderful, natural, biological no-brainer, and you have to fight the system to get them to see what our grandparents all knew. So,
so what I want to say about the doula, we quote the very quote you gave us now. So the doula makes a difference for the birth, but then the midwife and the doula knock off.
Yeah.
And that's when it really matters. And now you need a kangaroo.
Yeah.
So actually, Jill has developed this concept and worked in it. The birth is only halfway. It's the launch when you really want to get everything right. And in the immediate kangaroo mother care study that we've been referring to, Jill has trained what are called kangaroo mother care supporters. The study employs low-level staff with some basic training, but no nursing background necessarily, as kangaroo mother care supporters. You have to have dedicated staff to make sure the baby gets immediate. It's not in anybody's job description. You have to have dedicated staff to make sure the mother is continuous. It's not in anybody's job description. Breastfeeding in the first hour is not in anybody's job description. Keeping the baby in skin to skin, helping the mother find her friend when she needs to go to the toilets and change to a surrogate is not in anybody's job description. This is the intervention. It required training kangaroos. So indeed, Marshall put us on the right track with that one.
Yeah, and what was fascinating to me was they discovered it accidentally because a research assistant was, unbeknownst to them, acting like a doula, and they saw the results from the study and they couldn't figure out why, and they went back and figured out that this woman whose job was to collect the permission for the study, and she stuck around in the delivery room and was supporting the mothers, and it showed up in their data. That's how they figured it out, because they were studying breastfeeding and bonding and clueless, you know, again.
I think throughout the ages, women haven't given birth alone. They've always had somebody to support them.
Of course.
But it's only in modern medicine where it's about, it's not about health, it's about preventing disease. But women need the support of another person when they're giving birth to feel safe.
Yeah.
And then somebody needs to see that the newborn baby is safe, because you don't want, even a full-term baby can have apnea or whatever in the first few minutes of life. There needs to be somebody checking that baby all the time. And the mother's tired, she's labored for a long time. So that is where I've been working, in that space of training people to watch the baby, watch the mother, support them through the process. So yes, it is a doula, but the doula, when the baby is born, they leave, but the kangaroolas that I've been training are there to watch the baby, to check its breathing, to check that it's not getting cold, to check that it's been dried properly, and to support the early breastfeeding.
I know a number of doula trainers, and interviewing them, I'm going to be pitching that they need to stick around and be aware of this. And if there isn't a I got to say it right, kangaroula, that, you know, maybe this could be part of a doula's training to extend.
I do think it should be, because the doula has been there throughout the labor.
Yeah, well,
so
natural
she is
person.
the person the mother feels safe with, but they do need to learn how to work with the neonate and support the neonate, and what things to be careful of, and especially with preterm babies.
Yeah.
So what I've also been working on, I'd like to add in the context, the kangaroula doesn't kind of make sense to the allopathic, to this medical model, to the systems that we have. I've been working very much on trying to find a scientific rationale for what is happening. And neuroscience gives us a lot of tools and handles, but actually it fails because it sees the brain in a box in isolation. So how we understand the kangaroula and immediate skin-to-skin contact, I'm putting under a new word, which is called nurture science. One word, nurture science, not neuroscience, but nurture science. Right. Now, nurture is a bit like emotion, is a bit like homeopathy. It's not it's anti-allopathic medicine. It's an oxymoron almost. Nurture and science don't belong together. They're contradictory. Well, they necessarily.
In the Western brainwashed mind they are, but in in reality, they do belong together. And thank you
So,
for
so
putting them together.
that reality we call nurture science, and I've published some articles with that in collaboration with Martha Welch and her team in Columbia University in not Columbia, but Columbia in New York.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Well, I'm going to pitch this to all my doula friends to, first of all, watch this and then consider what they can do. I'm thinking Barbara Hotelling in North Carolina, and my dear friend in Australia is training doulas. It's just a natural that I hadn't made that connection before, and what a great term to tie them together. So they can put after
So
their name doula/kangaroo.
Jill has a formal structured course, a 40-hour course, and
Uh-huh.
material with that. The modern day, we are adapting to COVID. So we are probably working next year at putting something online as an introduction. But then there is a very practical demeanor, hands-on skill. You can teach head knowledge online. It's much more difficult to teach hands knowledge and heart knowledge.
Yeah, yeah.
And these three have to come together.
Well, if it could be built into doula trainings, eventually train some people that can then take it back to their trainings, that would be great. Oh.
Good idea.
Jill is doing a training in Cleveland, Ohio in September. So we hope it will be real, but otherwise it has to be online. We're committed to that.
Yeah.
As a first step for the United States.
Great. I'm curious, one of the things that has bothered me, and it's a little off topic, but related, is the premature clamping of the cord. That information's getting out, and the C-section's getting some microbiome swabs of the mother's vaginal secretions. But one of the things that's always bothered me is it seems to me that after the baby's out and the placenta's still in there, that the squeezing out of the placenta is going to put blood through the cord into the baby, even though the pulsations have stopped. That seems hydrodynamically obvious to me, but I don't deliver babies and I haven't actually seen it. But the fact that so many babies wind up being, what's the word, anemic, because they didn't get their last shot of blood. What are your thoughts on that? Just, this is totally an aside, but.
We always go with, on the births that I'm involved with, you need to speak to the doctors beforehand, but we always go with delayed cord clamping. While the baby, and our motivation for that is while the baby is starting to breathe with its lungs for the first time, it's still getting oxygenated blood. So if you cut the cord, you're taking away that oxygenated blood. So if you can leave the cord intact while the baby is learning to breathe, your baby's going to do much better.
Yeah.
So there is good evidence for, I think the terminology matters. I've worked a lot with what words are. And so we want to avoid early cord clamping. It's early cord clamping, which is the allopathic pathology.
Right.
So we avoid early cord clamping. We want normal cord clamping, which is leave it, let it, don't clamp it.
Yeah.
So avoiding early cord clamping is the physiology. We didn't have cord clamps before. And all of mammals have no cord clamps.
Yeah.
And they manage to survive fairly well. So yes, there's a basic physiology. I think one of the things that I've worked a lot with in synthesizing nurture science is life history theory, is looking at the broader patterns of reproductive fitness. And then you put this lens of life history theory on our practices in the obstetric room, cord clamping, yes, we're doing our job and we're doing it quickly and efficiently and it must be good. Now, there's no, so nobody thought further. But there is a science to think further and to base better practices on.
But often people, when they have delayed cord clamping, it is so that they can take the baby away from the mother. But if you say, can I please, to the doctor before the birth, it's important to do it well before the birth, to say, I would like delayed cord clamping. Then the baby is automatically put on the mother's stomach, abdomen, or onto her chest when the baby is born and can stay there until the cord has stopped pulsating. Mm-hmm. Then you've automatically got all of that oxygenated blood. The baby's got its own blood back again, and then it's appropriate. So it's an important message to give, that the baby shouldn't be taken away from the mother straight away. Yeah. Because then it destabilizes. And for a preterm, it destabilizes even more when it's taken away from the mother.
So in our immediate kangaroo mother care study, this has been taught as standard of care to both groups as best practice. Mm-hmm. The other thing that has been done to both groups that Jill has specifically been doing, linked to this actually, but it's hard to unpack an ecology, is early suckling on the breast and breastfeeding and expression of milk for very small babies and giving it to them in the first hour. This is part of our physiology also in our life history theory. Mm-hmm. So we see this immediate early expression and breast suckling as part of the same transition of nurture science of this issue of avoiding cord clamping.
Mm-hmm. But it does make sense, because the baby straight away is put to the breast and stimulates the breast while the oxytocin from the birth is in the mother's system. So it starts the breastfeeding, the milk production really early at the birth. There's already milk being started, the process has started. Mm-hmm. And therefore the babies are suckling and they're learning their suckling straight away, but the mother's milk process has started already. And for a preterm baby, that's absolutely essential, because they need a small amount of nutrients straight away.
Yeah. So this link between what we do in our study for preterm babies is actually informed by what is the physiology of all babies. Mm-hmm. All babies need this. Preterm babies need it more, but it's also more difficult to provide. And so in our immediate kangaroo mother care study, the KMC supporters, there's a lot of very practical issues in matching the physiological requirements and training staff and changing systems so that staff can do it. Mm-hmm.
Training people to train the parents how to express milk and start the milk production themselves.
Mm-hmm. Back to my original question, I'm not sure. Are you aware, or is it true that there is extra blood that will get squeezed out in the process of delivering the placenta and given to the baby if the cord's left open? Is my premise
yes, it is
accurate? Okay,
it is so. And what was the obstetricians would say, that's going to be dangerous. It's going to give the baby polycythemia.
Like we didn't evolve for how many million years?
And the other thing that obstetricians will then do is to milk the cord. That is harmful. It puts extra dose of blood in very quickly, but actually it's also less. It gives a lot quickly, which causes problems, but totally it's less than the baby would have got otherwise. So the
Yeah.
baby needs to get that blood nice and slowly.
Hmm. Hmm. As we were designed. There's an expression I noticed you used it, Jill, that one of my missions has been, and Darcy Narvaez, who I'm also in contact with, used it too, of talking about after birth as being the first days, weeks, hours of life, which denies the fact that they're 9 months old when they're born. Of life, to me, starts around time of conception. But that expression is so ingrained in the culture, and I always have a little glitch when I hear it. So I'm asking you to join my mission to get the of life extended 9 weeks, 9 months further
Mm,
back. So,
mm, mm.
well,
Very much so.
uh, this has been delightful. I think we've really gotten the full story or pretty big picture of your incredible work, and to catch the two of you together, despite my confusing the time and thinking you were in South Africa. Uh,
The time helped. Jill got back from visiting my father.
oh, good, good. All worked out. Good. Um, so I wanted to jump into another topic that's of great concern to me right now, and I have no idea where you are on it, but my causes have been water fluoridation, uh, infant circumcision, um, uh, and vaccinations over the last umpteen years. And I haven't paid much attention to vaccinations. I've been aware of it. Our daughter, who was born at home underwater 27 years ago, we didn't vaccinate. Uh, and now with the COVID, the promised vaccine that's going to end the epidemic, what I've learned, and Robert Kennedy Jr. has been my most trusted source, the team that he's assembled, uh, and the 54% of American kids that have chronic illnesses that correlate not only with vaccines, but with the food that we're given, the glyphosate, the everything else, and maybe the EMFs. But I'm curious where you are on the whole subject of infant vaccines and I don't know if they're giving 70 some doses in Sweden or not, but probably close to that. So do you have any comments you care to make on the subject of vaccines?
Yeah. So we're experiencing a pandemic. And we have 100 years of forgetting serious pandemic, never mind the HIV that came and disturbed us. So in the context of a pandemic, those original pandemics that decimated first peoples in the United States were smallpox. And they decimated 2/3 of Europe on one occasion.
Mm-hmm.
So smallpox vaccine made our current civilization possible. Really did. So I am at a public health level very much in favor of vaccine. Now, vaccines have to be managed properly. I think giving 77 vaccines to babies is not properly. I think it's also a difference between if I live in Zimbabwe and I live in the United States. In Zimbabwe, we give 8 vaccines. And those 8 vaccines, we very care, it's not difficult. We can trade off very quickly and easily the benefit to the cost. So I think once you start making a whole lot of different vaccines, and then you give them together, they're useless. A baby can take on one virus. That's the whole thing we're learning also with COVID. We have one virus to deal with, and the body deals with one virus at a time. So I have grave reservations about what am I saying?
Yeah, multi.
Several.
Mm-hmm.
Against several strains at the same time.
Yeah, the combination.
So mixing them, I think is probably not effectual. So at a population level, however, and this is also something we're learning with COVID, The viruses have a long intelligence of a kind that we don't understand, and that's beating us. And so the vaccine is one tool. I think we should look for other tools. I think we should look at other ways of staying alive. So my particular interest in terms of nurture science in this context, to answer your question, is the whole question of resilience
Mm-hmm.
and vulnerability, its opposite. So that resilience is actually as useful or more so. You mentioned diets and glycosylated things and fats and all sorts of things. I think our society is poisoning ourselves with things we take for granted,
Yeah.
far worse than vaccines are doing. So I think the whole fat story is one of them. The whole sugar story is another. I would prioritize those stories and the harm they do before I thought that vaccines do harm. But if you're giving 70 doses or even 20 doses of vaccine, that's too many. It's that none of them are, they're going to cancel each other out. So I do think that I need to qualify what I'm saying about vaccines by the fact that we've lived in Africa. We've lived in environments where those vaccines really, really, really matter.
Yeah.
I've seen babies dying of measles a lot. My father, we had a big party about 18 months after measles vaccine was started. It was the first time in the history of the hospital that the measles ward was empty.
Mm.
Even as a young person, I remember the first death I ever saw was a measles child.
Mm-hmm.
So that perspective colors some of what I say about vaccines.
Well, one of the interesting things is the CDC data showing the infection levels and deaths over time were decreasing dramatically through the 30s and 40s. And by the time the vaccines were introduced, the curves didn't change. And so what they're saying really happened is public health, sanitation, the things that you didn't have in Zimbabwe, that it seems to me putting money and effort into that, like the Gates Foundation, more than vaccines. Why aren't they focusing on public health measures and better water and all of these, the engineering that has, when I did my master's in public health at Hopkins, they pointed out it wasn't modern medicine that has made the extended life expectancy, it's sanitation.
And I think with that is also a lot of potential amazing benefit if we understood resilience better and its sources. And it connects very much also to the work we're doing with nurture.
Mm-hmm.
If the baby can stay with its mother, it can hear a loud noise, but let's say it's a boy baby, it can hear a loud noise, but mum didn't react, so I'm okay, I'm safe.
Yeah.
So the baby learns from the place that I am safe, mum didn't jump. Mm-hmm. So it's important if the mother and baby are together, then they are going to get, the baby's going to get the resilience that it needs to cope with the world.
I'm thinking, the ACEs quiz needs to be not getting this kind of skin-to-skin contact is a adverse condition that very few of us didn't avoid. So it's an automatic
deprivation.
Yeah.
But if you think of the microbiota and the work that has been done in a third world hospital, if you get the microbiota from your mother, which is appropriate for the environment you're going to go back to, compared to the microbiota from a very busy ward where every child that is born is put into the same incubator, and the cloth is changed twice a day, maybe.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
much safer to get the microbiota from the mother.
exactly. Wow, this has been so great. I'm feeling like we're reaching the end. If you have any final words of wisdom for what we hope will be viewers down the line, maybe after we're gone, if it lasts that long, let's hear your parting words.
I do come back to you then, Jack. Yes, wellness. I learned all about disease at medical school. After 15 years of training, I started working and discovered I knew nothing about health.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first bit I learned about health, wellness, was indeed the kangaroo mother care, was indeed the skin-to-skin contact of a very small baby that was 1,000 grams, that could be healthy, that could be well, that could experience wellness. So kudos to you. Thanks to you, sir. The wellness matters. It's a worthy cause. It's a legacy that you want to leave behind. Stay with it.
I will. And for me, reading Gene Liedloff's book was such an aha in 1990 of, oh my God, we've locked the barn door after the horses have left. It's connection. It's the early, that's when I shifted to infant wellness and began using that term. And that's how I
And
found out about you.
I don't think that a baby can be well separated from its mother,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's the safe place for that baby on every single level. The emotional safety, the physical safety, the provision of every need for the baby. We are making those babies sick by separating them from the mother.
Mm.
And the baby, as you said, spent 9 months becoming well and prepared to be born to stay well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So understanding wellness, we talk in our work that it begins in the first 1,000 seconds of life, but that's actually after birth. Those 1,000 seconds is when wellness really, really needs extra attention. And so then we consolidate those in 1,000 minutes. But it's understanding wellness, it's understanding health and the continuity, as you say, and making mother-infant connection. So in a very broad sense, all this resilience, nurture science, it really is the simple synthesis, condensed. Mothers and babies must stay together, that Jill is talking about.
It's the baby's basic biological right to stay with the mother.
Well, I would sum it up by saying, well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to end the recording now. And